Welcome to the American Reformer Podcast, hosted by Josh Abbotoy and Timon, Cline. Our mission is to promote a vigorous Christian approach to the cultural challenges of our day, rooted in the rich tradition of Protestant social and political thought.
Welcome back to the American Reformer Podcast. One of your usual hosts here, Timon, Cline, Editor-in-Chief. And I'm joined in the studio today by a guest that for some of you that are at least terminally online and in the right circles will need no introduction. Pax Americana is with me in the studio. And Pax, thank you so much for joining. I think we started talking about you coming on like a little while back, so it's good to make it happen. As we do with all of our guests, I want to kick it off by just having you tell us a bit about your story and your background, and we can get into the account and other things wherever you want to take it from there.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having me. Right. So my background is in, if we go all the way back to like mid-late 2000s, I have a background in print design and graphic design. So I went to public school, and in New England, where I'm from, there's a concept of vocational high schools that I find like doesn't necessarily carry throughout the rest of the country. Like, I live in Texas now. And they don't have very many of them here. Like, you have vocational schools that you can get a certificate after high school or whatever, but this is actually, you go to high school for 4 years and you alternate between 1 week I go to my academic classes and then the next week I go to shop. And so for the most part, that is, their shops are a little bit more geared toward like manual labor and things like cosmetology, nursing, stuff like that. But they also had a graphic design shop. And so that was kind of where I got my teeth cut in terms of learning like typography, like what is good design, how does graphic design work, all of that good stuff. And then kind of throughout the years after that, I segued that into a career in user experience and user interface design. And so most of my career is in corporate, right? So working on the user experience of internal software systems, stuff like I worked for a major print retailer, one that you would go to like if you had to ship something or if you wanted to go print a banner for your daughter's birthday or what have you. And so I worked on actual like designing the software that the employees in store used during that process. So that's kind of like the background. But I've always generally been really interested in aesthetics, art, music, culture. I played in bands. That was kind of like what I wanted to do when I was younger. When I got out of high school, like I really didn't want to go to college. Like, I was convinced that my friends and I could be in a successful rock and roll band. That obviously didn't pan out. I continued to go to college. My parents insisted like, okay, hey, you can do this. You can go on tour and all that stuff with your friends, but you better be taking classes part-time as well. So, I that was kind of what I wanted to do, but I kind of fell into like the software corporate career. Last year I just found myself with like a lot of downtime, right? Like, corporate can lead to a place like that where it's just, you've got 7 hours of meetings a day. You're not functionally really needed for, 50-60% of that time. And so you're just thinking about, like what's going on in the world or posting or reading. And that's kind of what led to Pax. I had been looking at, I've been seeing some of the other like Americana, like aesthetic accounts. The big one that I think kind of everyone knows is like, that's actually literally the name is Americana Aesthetics. That was kind of like the original, I feel like. And I'd seen that and a couple of others crop up and I was like, I really like that. And there's something I really like about documenting American culture, like taking a snapshot of, the stuff that our people produce, whether it's architecture, like beautiful buildings, whether it's paintings, like we're seeing Homeland Security posts now, like honoring that heritage.
I was going to say the biggest aesthetic account is Homeland Security at this point.
I know they're doing such a good job too. But I was really interested in just capturing all of that stuff. It was kind of funny. There was an unlikely influence. There's a Canadian show actually called Letterkenny, and it's like stupid like comedy show. But I had watched it a little bit, and I was reading an interview with the creator, and he was talking about how like they don't use anyone outside of Canada for anything, like the music on the show, the actors, like it's all filmed in Canada, and he just had like a really tangible commitment to like Canadian culture. And I find that really inspiring. And so I was like, thinking about it and thinking about aesthetics and then thinking about my own background in design. And I was like, I think I could make a pretty cool account where I not only kind of curate and document things, American cultural things, but also contribute to that in some way as well. And before Pax, I was kind of posting into the void for a year or two, just under my real name. No following really. Some mutuals that were folks I knew from work and that kind of thing, but posting largely to no one. But one thing that I had been getting some success with was like AI generated images. Like I had kind of figured out this formula to dial in like a pretty, what in my opinion was a pretty solid aesthetic for like things like realistic cityscapes, things like that. And that was one of the few things that when I was real name posting, like people seemed to engage with. And I was like, okay, I think there's like a layer of something here. And so when I made Pax, I was like, well, why don't we try and introduce that somehow? And that's kind of come along in different ways. Like I've done some like national park, like sort of WPA, old school style, like, hey, see America stuff. I've done, I've started to do this less, but for a little while there, what I would do is when a government agency like Department of Energy or Interior or what have you would post like a really particularly kind of what I felt mailed in graphic for, say, like recruitment, like I would quote it and like redesign it. And some of that stuff blew up pretty good. And I've started to pull back a little bit because I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm being critical of folks who are probably interns or probably doing multiple different jobs. And the goal isn't to necessarily like make people feel bad, but I think it's okay to want to hold our government to a little bit of a higher standard when it comes to communications and graphics and things like that. I feel like we used to do that. I feel like the average quality of a, recruitment poster for air traffic controllers, say, was much higher 40 years ago than it is today. And there's probably a lot of different reasons for that. But like, when a government agency goes on and they say like, hey, we're hiring air traffic controllers, and like the image just looks absolutely terrible. It's like, there's something in me that's like, we can do a better job with that. Like we can make this, we can turn the vibe up on this substantially, I feel like. So I try not to do that because I'm not trying to like go after anybody or make anyone feel bad about like their work output. But that is something that I've historically liked to do. So and then lately I've been doing a lot of AI generated like pixel art animations. Those have been a hit. They tend to attract a broad audience, we'll say,
especially if there's sea shanties in the background.
Yeah, well,
it's a good combo.
That one got a lot of Navy attention and a lot of veterans, which was great. You get a mix with the pixel art, like people, all different walks of life, basically, we'll put it that way. But I think the main thing that I'm just trying to do is just document, like when people say, like, it just, a lot of this is downstream of the fact that I take it personally when people say things like, Americans have no culture, America has no culture. I take it personally when people say things like America is an intrinsically bad country in any way, whether that's systemically racist, or whether it's it's just an evil capitalist nation with nothing material to it besides that. Like all of that I kind of take personally, because I'm from here, and my dad and his father are from here. And I feel like we do have a culture, and I feel like it can be hard to define, but I think it's tangible. I think it's difficult to say that we don't. And so a lot of what I'm posting is just trying to capture that. Like, sometimes it's something silly, like a Dodge Challenger doing burnouts. Sometimes it's, a main lighthouse. Like it's just little snapshots of like who I feel we are as a people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I obviously having you on the show because I love your account. But there's lots of aesthetic accounts that I do follow, but then there's tons that even I don't, that they do just blow up. Like, so there's clearly what interests me about this is like that it's a thing that like people want to see it on their feed. And it's hard to like even figure out like what are people getting out of it? It's not information typically. You could argue that in some of what you do, there's like information there embedded, but that can't be the primary driver behind people enjoying it, right? But they want to see it. And I did think, when you mentioned the Dodge Charger burning out, now it's a meme, of the old, may have been a Charger commercial where George Washington's driving it, right? Like people use the meme all the time now, or the clip. And it's like advertising used to kind of take care of the, maybe it's going to again, maybe there's signs of life, but it used to kind of take care of this. And obviously people wanted to buy stuff like that, that's, we know what they're doing, but like Vanity Fair used to have like hundreds and hundreds of pages of ads, and they would sell these, like it's mostly ads, but they're beautiful ads, or they're well done or whatever. And people would buy it and just look at them, and that's all kind of gone, at least certainly in physical magazines. You don't have that market anymore. It used to be huge through the 90s. So like there's something about encountering aesthetics that appeal to you, and kind of have your number, like they know you. And Americans kind of want that it seems to me, for themselves. And that's like there's something going on that's driving like the explosion of aesthetic accounts. And it's not just people like deciding, oh, let's all be positive. Let's just post positive things. There's a real, affection for it. And you see the interactions. I mean, a lot of these posts go, massively viral. But what do you think is going on with it, especially on the right? In this sort of, I think it's fair to call it a sort of phenomenon. It's its own genre of things going on online.
I can tell you, I think so first of all, I think the marketing point is actually a really good point that I hadn't even really considered, in terms of like this used to be something that ads would serve, and now people just aren't getting it because everything is like a goofy pharmaceutical commercial. Like I hadn't even really considered that. I think that's a really good point. I think one thing that shows up particularly, let's say with the pixel art stuff, is there's a younger generation of men who have had a lot of what they think is cool, or maybe what their dad thought was cool, and they grew up kind of admiring, get torn out of a lot of the culture. And so I think maybe this is why I can, or maybe why I have a little bit of an easier time tapping into that, is because it's like I grew up, I'm an elder millennial, so I grew up like with Nintendo culture, like with a dad who took me to NASCAR races, who took me to the garage every Thursday night to hang out with him and his friends when they worked on their motorcycles. I think there's a lot of men who grew up in younger men who grew up in environments like that. But the common pulse across media, whether it's marketing or whether it's especially video games, which are just a total freak show of just all of the worst elements of the DEI crowd constantly. Like everything has just been so stripped down and so turned into this like purple diverse blob that I think when people see something like, oh, that looks like my dad's old Corvette parked in our garage during an autumn when I was like 12, 13 years old, right? And leaves are falling. I think that really just hits with people. And like when I when I put something out, when I create something like that, I feel that too, because I turn around and then I'm like, well, there's part of me that always loved like gaming, but now I look at like, 99.9% of games and, 95% of movies that come out, 95% of TV shows that get released. Like we have so much of all of that now, but I have a hard time relating to any of it as just a white hetero guy who grew up with a dad that was present and liked, liked America and liked, the culture that we have and all of that good stuff. So I think there's definitely that layer to it for sure. But then there's also, when I think about like a lot of the national park stuff that I've done, like some of the graphic design, like the flyers and stuff like that, I think there's also that gets again to like some of the government maybe not doing as good of a job there as well. Like the national parks, there's certainly a lot of money and certainly a lot of people working, in the national parks and the interior effort and all of that. But I don't necessarily see like big plays by anyone in particular to push that stuff on people. Like, hey, we're doing a campaign and like we have these cool new posters that we're, trying to do a, 1940s, 1950s throwback, like we're selling this stuff. Like I don't see that materialize all that often. And maybe it does, and maybe I'm just not fully in the loop there. But, again, I just feel like it goes to like the government kind of not maybe holding the bar where maybe they used to 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, maybe it goes to, it's the imagery, it's the aesthetics, but it's also even the, what would you say? It's the sounds and the music around it too. I mean, there's been a total revival, through like the synthwave stuff or whatever. That's very like, even some of the style is like 80s and 90s with Zoomers. They're like, they're doing it in their own cauliflower hair way. That's added. I want to ask like all the young guys at my gym if all of them just happen to be born with curly hair that's exactly the same, or if there's something else going on. But there's different. It's interesting. And style always does that. But it's like just interesting what they've chosen. And I wonder if like with the combination of these things, it's like the aesthetics, which are. There's something you're appealing to there of like the throwback to even 40s and 50s stuff is much more aspirational. There is a sense of like unity and duty in it. I even like am kind of, if you look at like Soviet propaganda, it's like fascinating. Yeah. It's the same era, so it's like Cold War era, but it's like same era. And it's, some of it's like very on the nose, which like makes you laugh and it's kind of camp and all this, but it's just, there's something way more aspirational there and proud and I guess optimistic, you would say. I mean, we were talking before we started recording too about like the reintroduction of like an interest in space coinciding with this, like all these sort of elements are coming together that it's like especially millennials down, because millennials have we've had a rough go of it. Like, are we just looking for optimism in a sense, or a taste of it that maybe our parents got to enjoy in the 80s and we haven't had for like 20 years at least?
That's a huge part of it. I think I get that feedback from people all the time that like, hey, thanks for like I'll get DMs. It'll be like, thanks for making me feel, exactly like you put it, like optimistic, positive about the country. That's kind of been a theme since the get-go. Like so it was November of 2024 that I created the account. And so we were right in the midst of, election, Trump 2.0, all of that stuff. And I kind of had always just been like, okay, like that, the first sort of positioning was like, okay, yeah, like golden age is here. That's great. Like pushed on that thread heavy. That resonated with a lot of people. But then it's kind of just blended into this, like, I mentioned this the other day, but like, Thomas Skinner, the guy from England, the Bosch guy. Yeah, like I don't quite have that vibe, but I really try to reflect that, like when he went on that talk show and they were trying to vilify him for like, how dare you be proud of like the English flag, and he's just smiling and waving the flag, and he's like, what's wrong with this? Like, why is this bad? Like we see that all the time. Like you're seeing it with like, anytime that someone says, I'm a proud American, like there's some percentage of the population who are just ready to stand up and be like, well, why are you proud? Like, why would you be proud of a country that, gave smallpox to the Indians and blah, 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 and slavery and this and that. And it's like, I just reject all of that. Like, I don't reject that bad things happen in our history. But I think bad things happen in every country's history. And, we give no leeway to a lot of our people give no leeway to ourselves in terms of like, okay, maybe X, Y, and Z happen, but like, what about, everything else that's gone on in our country, and like all of the innovation in space flight and aerospace and all of these things. And so there is a positive, like I would say there's like a positive optimism vibe. There's also a little bit of a chip on the shoulder, which also kind of strikes me as sort of quintessentially American in a way. I feel like that little bit of like, hey, whatever you say, I don't care. Like, actually, we're awesome. That is kind of, I think, to some extent, part of it culturally. But I try to be optimistic. It can be hard, just because there are so many enemies, left, right, center. But I feel like that's important, and I try my best to like embody that as much as I can, because I want people to feel similarly. Like I want people to reject the idea that America has no culture, reject the idea that we are an intrinsically awful, horrible nation, founded by bad people.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think the Thomas Skinner thing, I mean, it's like, it's contagious in a way. Like everyone admires him when they say, not just even in the clip, but just his, what he's decided. I don't even know how to describe what he does with social media. He just like, it's not motivational speaking exactly. It's just like
it's close
talking every day. It's close, but it's also like, he's always projecting an image. Like he's doing kind of traditionally masculine things. It's like either him at work or him at the bar with his buddies or him at home with his family playing with his kids. Like, and like sometimes working out, like, but it's these very traditional, there's something like settling about that. And he's just proud of it. Right. He's very, evidently like probably middle class, like he's got this normal guy kind of feel to him. That's, I think it helps reorient people in a way of like, yeah, this is the aspirational thing. This did used to be what we thought was like it. This is what you're going for. And then we were told in various different ways that was not it. Either it's something much, much higher you need to be shooting for, or all that is actually bad and oppressive and like, the linchpin to all evil in the world. So, I think that's exactly right, that people just want, it's kind of, I was talking to someone earlier today that it's like, on the one hand, especially with the Zoomers, you're going to have like overcorrection always. Like when people wake up to certain kinds of conditioning, they're going to reject it, and it's going to have to like necessarily be violent in that way, not physically, but it's like it's going to be a violent rejection. And so then the danger there is like pure kind of cynicism, like I don't care about anything, because I'm so tired of being told I have to care about XYZ. I'm just not going to care about anything at all. But this is like what you're doing, and what you do see other people kind of adopting the same energy or doing. It's like a positive spin on that, I would say. It's like an appropriate kind of I don't care, and also there's a certain kind of recovery of dynamism there or something, which is national. It's like you can see this in certain policies even and stuff. So I would say like an attempt at appropriate recovery of pride and even security, like self-security, just like, yeah, I like this stuff. It's like a trope for Americans to talk about like how to place they are abroad and like to be somewhat sheepish about their own culture. It's dumb or whatever. And instead, the message is, no, it's great. And in fact, like the rest of the world wants it. supposedly it's like Coca-Cola showing up in Russia or at a supermarket that, ends the Cold War. So it's like, come on.
Total American cultural victory.
Total victory.
And you see those everywhere. You see those everywhere. I mean, it's just, you go to, like, I went to Australia years ago, and like the second I got off the plane, it's like, here's Subway, here's Burger King, like, and obviously like the fast food and like chains and all that is one thing. But I mean, I just feel like our cultural output just winds up everywhere. Like there are people who love The Sopranos in Algeria, right? In Greece, and like, just things like that. And, some of it is for better or worse. Like, I mean, we certainly output a lot of garbage into the world culturally in terms of like TV and movies and all that stuff too. But I think that, like, I really believe in my heart of heart that like we set the tone for the world in terms of music, movies, culture. I mean, maybe hasn't always been that way, but I think for the last, 50, 60 years, like, as America goes, so does certainly the Western world and the Anglosphere, but I think, frankly, the rest of the world at this point too.
Well, that it's talking about the rest of the world, I think it leads also to, as many people have posted this, Orrin McIntyre posts it like once a week, I think, of like, the main question for us, like for our time, at least for the foreseeable future, is something like it should be super basic, but it can't be taken for granted of just like what's an American. Like we don't know how to define it anymore. We don't know how to protect it or put boundaries around it or any of these things. And I think that translates culturally also. Like I think these things go hand in hand, and not to get off on like a tangent, but it's like I find. At least for America, like assimilation is a very hard thing to legislate, to force assimilation. Now, the big challenge is if you do, if your scale is too big, if the scope is too big and you're doing too much at once. But just like, let's say it's manageable, it's very hard to like mandate it. And if you do, you get to very sort of lowest common denominator things like English tests, whatever, like great. But those things are cultural things that like a confident culture does. Like it's you need a stigma, essentially like cultural bullying, of like, you have to, no, we do it this way here. You have to be this way. And people just pick up on that, a lot of it can be unspoken, but it's very hard to make force assimilation when you have a weak, like sort of cowardly culture that's not sure of itself. So I think this goes not just like within what is it to be an American? When do you have to have been born here? So on and so forth. That's one conversation. The other thing is like, what does it mean to be an American culturally? And like, what are the pieces of it, at least that we can identify, and maybe that you've identified and try to like repeatedly go back to and kind of pull on or emphasize?
It is really difficult because it is interchangeable too. Like you could say like you should be interested in like you should like baseball or something, but like I don't really like baseball. I used to when I was younger. But like you should find Leonard Skinner palatable, or you should be able to at least handle the viewing of one like NASCAR race or something like that. Like it is hard because there are a lot of elements to it, and they're interchangeable even with people like I would say you or I, who are very obviously culturally American. Like you and I might not, I think we probably do, but we might not have a lot of the same interests. It's really, really hard. I think that assimilating as far as like, are you celebrating 4th of July? Like, are you remotely interested in like where you come from? Like, is the pomp and circumstance of America and the experience of living here and the upside of living here, like, is that what it's about to you? Or like, are you at least attuned and respectful and mindful of like where we came from and what it took to settle a country like this, and what an absolute miracle and testament to not only obviously God, but also the men who founded this country, like that we settled this nation in the amount of time that we did. Right, like I feel like there's a spirit to that like if you don't if you're not appreciative of it, or if you don't think about it in a way that, inspires you in some way, I feel like you probably haven't assimilated. I think if you move here and you learn English decently enough and your kids go to American public school, like, I don't qualify that as assimilation. I think that alone is not enough. I think, like, you have to have an ingrained appreciation for just how much the country has done and accomplished, and just how much how many coin flips had to go another way for this all to have been completely different, like from the 1600s to now. And it's so funny because when I think about all of the stuff I was mentioning before with, like, the negative things, the negative narratives that get pushed about the US history and our culture and all that, so much of it is exactly opposite to that. It's like, it wasn't settled by brave people. Like, it was just stolen from existing people. It wasn't the ingenuity of the settlers that, was able to come up with all this infrastructure. It was just you using slave labor. Everything, all of the kind of the narratives I feel like get pushed in popular culture and social media and things like that by our enemies is opposite of what I feel like you have to embrace if you want to be or hope to assimilate. And I don't know, it's tough. It really is a complex question, and I've thought about it a lot, and there's so many different interchanging parts to it, but I feel like for me, at the core of it, you have to understand, it's never been, in all of my years of exposure to, all of the libtardation of the last 10, 15 years, and all of hearing those narratives every day. I've never once felt like I'm not proud to be American. Like, we can acknowledge and we can navel gaze about slavery or, Indians, tribes, all of that. But it's never, to me, been, I've never looked at it as anything other than to be proud of. It'd be like, look at what these settlers did. Look at, the startling, miracle that this country is. And, how can you not be proud to say, I'm from here? My family is from here.
Yeah. I think, most people kind of know this now too. It's like, even the regrettable periods of history, which there are many for everyone's history, but it's like the story has been, as you're pointing out, completely skewed the other way for so long that when there's not even, it's not even like a intentional corrective, but if you watch American Primeval, that show, it's just all around brutality, and you're like, yeah, this is just a tough place. Good luck picking a side in this one. This is just a crazy time. There's no superhero here, and the world is not magic wizards, fighting each other. It's this stuff. So it was just brutal, and the people that survived that and carved a place. I mean, it began on the Eastern Seaboard in the 17th century, and that same process continued several times throughout westward expansion. It's the people that were able to do that and had the determination to do that, they are admirable. They should be celebrated, and what we did as a people should be celebrated. And it doesn't require you to have a Pollyanna vision of history, but it just requires you to be an American, essentially. So I think you're right to point out that there's, as much as there may be other markers of assimilation that are a little more quantifiable, it's also adopting a certain sentiment about the place and the people. And I think that's why, if I'm not mistaken, this is even what Thomas Aquinas gets into when he talks about full citizenship for the second or third generation, because those grandchildren, they've lost all memory of the prior place, and they've really learned, they're in tune now with their now native culture, and that's the only place they can have affection for, because they just don't have knowledge of anything else, so it's they're able to develop the affection for this new place but it takes a long time, right? It takes generations to get, because you have to kind of this transition, and I think that's that's right to point out that like this process is as much about emotions in that way as it is about any of the other markers we could come up with.
And I think that a lot of, we're just not, our kids, I feel like, don't get exposed anymore enough to, like the stories, like you just mentioned, there, like, you'll see a little bit of it, but like, I grew up with the Oregon Trail. Like, I post a GIF of covered wagons, and there's 100 people in my mentions being like, Oregon Trail based, love it. And like, we grew up with that stuff. You see it a little bit now, but not really. Like, there's not a big emphasis on this like American storytelling, and so kids don't necessarily grow up being exposed to these stories of like, okay, listen, you're 8-year-old Johnny, and you have your 9-year-old sister Jane, and if this was 200 years ago, you might be out for a break in under your covered wagon at camp, and you might get bit by a snake and you're dead. Like that that was the reality for so many people like settling America. And you never hear about that anymore. It's just the Indians were there, and the white folks showed up from Europe and killed them all. And then they took black people from Africa and made them slaves. That's what gets pushed on the younger generation, on everybody, frankly, but especially on the younger generation. And so I would love to see more of like that Oregon Trail, or American Primeval was great, a little hardcore as far as like children audience, but just more stuff like that where it's like, look, these were bold people who founded the United States. It was no joke, and there was a lot of suffering, and the narrative only goes the other direction now, unfortunately, for the most part. So I'd love to see more of that. Yeah,
and even I think I heard Charles Haywood say this first, and I've done it a little bit. My kids are very young, so it's not as relevant yet. But just he just bought, through Amazon or whatever, like just prioritized buying books for like young boys that were all published. Like he picked a date; it was like 1960 something or prior, because the slant of all that, especially in the history books, but it's not just that the weighting of certain facts changes. It's the entire thrust of it, of like, what's the point of learning about this? It's no longer to have heroes. It's no longer to have like aspirational figures. That's all gone. So you're giving, especially young boys, like nothing to look at, which classically was the whole point of studying history anyway. It's to like to learn who to emulate and who to reject, So that's definitely gone. But if you find a book like a George Washington kids book from like the 20s, it's all there, like the myth and everything. And it's just great, and, I don't think people are stupid. They understand like what myth's doing, but it's essential to have those things.
That's another thing that when you mentioned George Washington, it just kind of pinged in my mind, but that's something else that I've talked about a little bit on X is a lot of these cultural institutions, this is something I'm really passionate about bringing more awareness to. A lot of these cultural institutions, like American heritage places like Monticello and Mount Vernon and stuff like that, are just entirely captured by the left.
Yes.
They're owned outright by large ownership. Sometimes, the circumstances are all different, and there are many of them. But if you go to, any one of these places, it becomes the narratives that get pushed are more about the enslaved people. That's the term that they specifically like to use. Enslaved people, and not about like the great men that lived there, not about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all of this. And it's something that I try to encourage people. Like if you're taking your kids on a trip, summer, fall, whatever, like go to these places, but also like have an understanding, and do some background of your own and understand like how to counteract a lot of this stuff. Because I feel like these cultural sites are very like vitally important to us culturally, but like they've been captured, man. Like it's no joke. It's Heritage Foundation has written a lot about this actually. I can't remember the specific author, but you want to go there and say like, yes, okay, like George Washington had slaves, like, that's where that portion of it is. But also it's important to, also remember this is the guy that crossed to Delaware. Like this was like, teach your kids about the great man theory, right? Like, because I feel like history proves that kind of time and time again. So, that's just a thought, because like thinking about in terms of, I feel the urgency of that problem all the time, because one thing I'll do on the account, I don't do it as much lately, but I did for a long time, was kind of document the photography, like take pictures from online and kind of put together like, hey, this is what Monticello looks like, all of these different places that the former presidents lived and all that. And I feel like a lot of these places are in serious jeopardy in terms of actually storytelling, like doing justice to the storytelling that is deserved. It's especially in the post George Floyd era, there's just been this absolute like leftist takeover of these institutions. And it's very scary to me.
No, that's totally true. I used to, when I still lived in Philadelphia for a long time. And at one point I was working, would work, in the city summit. The office I was at was like right behind Independence Hall. So, I mean, I would like walk. The point is there's a, in 1812, I think is when the building was burned down. That was like the original building that the president was staying in, right? The original presidential house before we were working on Washington. So George Washington was there. And like, so they have like the foundation of it left, you know where it was. And if you go over there, the only plaques there, even though they tell you like, this is George Washington's house. And this is, whoever else had different dignitaries stayed there, whatever, like that's there. But the stories, that is definitely designed for adolescents, to read and to sort of walk through. It's almost like guided tour, is all about the people who worked in the kitchen, like not even just this, like the slaves for sure, but then like all these other people. It's all about like these rudimentary things and like the underclass. That's the whole message. And I think when we had Alex Petkus on here too, we were talking about, he was saying the same thing about literature, certainly scholarship, but then even movies that have to do with like Rome. It's always like this emphasis on the margins of like, that's even in the background. It's like what's emphasized, the environment, like they really want you. It's not for the point of trying to make like the environment real in a sense. It's the emphasis is on, look at the margins. That's what's important. Look at the oppressed, look at, the downtrodden, look at the victims of these great men, and like the collateral damage, like all the time. So that you're absolutely right. I think that's everywhere. It's certainly in DC. If you go to see DC, it's totally different than anytime I'm there. It's totally different than when I was like 10 years old, so and it's a concerted effort. Like these things don't happen on their own. And my rule is like, you always know that it matters if they're doing it. They don't waste energy on doing things that don't matter. So if they're taking a vested interest, just like public spaces like libraries or whatever, it's like there's a point to this that has cultural impact and educational impact, almost pre-rational conditioning impact. Otherwise, they would not waste their time on it. It's the same thing with monuments. All these things definitely matter. And I think conservatives have like taken a, set that out a lot, at least certainly having no positive vision for it.
I think part of it is that maybe we didn't encourage enough people to get into these fields like historical preservation and things like that. I think that some of that is a byproduct of, a lot more leftists going to school for like liberal arts and humanities and things like that. And then they wind up, as preservationist at such and such. And then the next thing you know, they're the head of communications for Mount Vernon or whatever group owns all of the, particular properties in question. And one like goal of mine, I feel, with the account and posting, because I always want to get something out of it, but I like money and all of that stuff is like the least consequential thing in terms of like what I get out from the account. Like what I want from the account is I want to hear that like kids are seeing places that I post and taking them, like taking your kids there, for a vacation, or, maybe there's a kid who's like 18, 19, freshman in college, and like would have maybe gotten a job at like, 7-Eleven or something in the summer, but ends up taking a job as like a low level caretaker or something. Like that's the kind of like push that I would really hope that I could impact people on, because I feel like we haven't got enough of our guys in that system. And I'm deeply concerned about, all of our cultural heritage sites, across the board. I just feel like it's already been captured by the left. Many of them have already been captured by the left. I think it's only going to get worse. And we've got a momentum right now where it's like, I would love to see a bigger push from right-wing conservative folks, to get into that space. Like if it's remotely interesting to you, I would say like chase it, because, there's part of me that wishes I did on some level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's even, I haven't followed the story now, but I think it was like a couple months ago where it was like the Biden appointee to the America 250 committee or whatever this is was still there. She was still running the show even after Trump came into office, and everyone's like, what do you think that's going to look like, next year if you don't change the personnel and these things. But I think you're exactly right that the left just does better. I mean, the left is, there's plenty of explanations people can come up with for why, but the point is like they're the ones that take the time and run libraries. They're the ones that operate precincts. They're the ones that sit on town councils. They just do these things that like in some sense are menial, or you can say like question the impact. But if you're doing it at scale, across the board, the impact's huge. And if you do it for a long time, if you're sort of dedicated to it, and that's how you're able to then, with sort of the stroke of a pen, enact all these changes really quickly that are extremely impactful. And we saw that. I mean, surely 2020 demonstrated to people like what they're actually willing to do with our historic sites and our heritage in that way.
And before you know it, they're selling White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo at the gift shop in every place in DC.
Exactly.
And that's why, and I think you're right to point out, like, there's a lot of reasons why, a lot of our guys didn't necessarily go down that route, but I think that I'm less interested in that and more interested in like, how can we inspire more younger generations to be interested in this, values aligned people who are, okay, I'm gonna, maybe it's not the most traditional, learning path, but like, I like history a little bit. So like, why don't I at least explore the idea of a career in like preservation or something like that? So there's at least some more representation from our side at minimum.
Yeah. And then the, sort of circling back to where we started to just I would say the developing kind of like the different genres and modes of art and aesthetics on the right is something that, like, clearly, as we pointed out, there's interest in this, but it's still developing. Aaron Wren had a good piece a while back that, like, I think he created like a taxonomy of like there's 5 different aesthetics for the right, and then gave them like descriptions and style, and most of it coming from online. It's like, what, do you post pictures of like Woodstock, Vermont, or are they AI generated like sort of futurist models, or are they, these things, or is it neoclassical? And like, then it's a great sort of breakdown. So it's like, clearly we're trying to, that's all being figured out. And so like, people do need to continue to invest in that, because it's all those, there's pieces of all of those that have to be there. The nostalgia has to be accounted for, the like your tradition, but then also, some kind of optimism for the future as well, of where you're going, if you're embodying like the American spirit all the way around.
The nostalgia element to me is like, I try really, really hard to not dwell on that too much. Like I am proud to be able to inspire that in people in some way or form or fashion. But like, very early on with my account, I think I posted a lot of like, Cincinnati Public Library used to be this just absolutely stunning art, But I've watched a lot of people go down that rabbit hole to the point where it's just like, I don't think that you can, I'm not sure if you're able to appreciate like some of what we have now, or, you know, more importantly, have optimism for what we could do in the future. Like if you look at like what Monumental Labs are doing, which they're, it's like 3D printing with AI assisted robots. Like I'm not super versed in the technology itself that they're using, but they do this like beautiful, like it looks like carved marble sculpture. And, you know, they're producing that stuff now, like here, right now in America. And I think it's very easy to look at all of the Art Deco stuff, to look at, you know, like that Cincinnati Public Library, stuff like that, and just black pill. But we're doing some cool stuff now. I anticipate and pray that that will accelerate. I think that it will. And in the end, some of it, we're not even going to know what it looks like until it's here. Like, I never thought that Americana pixel art would be as absolutely great as it is, but then it just kind of happened. And so, like over time and with scale over across a civilization, you know, I feel like the outputs are going to be, you know, phenomenal. We just haven't gotten there. So, I guess like, you know, the TLDR of it is like, I love the nostalgia element, but, I also am wary to spend too much time like being, you know, looking at it through a lens other than just like, wow, that was really great. And, or, oh, you can go see this now. Like the Guardian building in Detroit, still, you know, well kept, beautiful, stunning, like Art Deco lobby and all of that. Like all of that stuff still exists. You can go see it now. So I think it's a fine line between like ruminating on that stuff and getting kind of sucked into like a negative void, versus like appreciating it and like thinking, hey, wait, if we did this 50, 60, 70 years ago, like who knows, you know, a group of highly cracked Americans with AI and robots could do.
Well, I think that, thank you for being generous with your time and talking to us a little bit about this. And I hope that it is inspirational for people, and that they, of course, follow the account, because it is a great account. I repost a lot of it.
Thank you.
And enjoy it. The only times I don't repost if I'm like, you know, it's already been 2 today. I don't want to do like, you know, 5 today. So I'll like hold off, but there's many great things to enjoy. We've talked about it some. Everyone should go check it out. Thank you again, Pax, for being generous with your time and talking to us a little bit about this. Any sort of parting thoughts of maybe something we didn't get to or say that you want to throw out there for the audience before we sign off?
I just, God bless America. That's all.
Perfect. Excellent.
That's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, audience, for tuning in. As always, go subscribe, and until next time, God bless.
You can find American Reformer on the internet at www.americanreformer.org or on x.com, formerly Twitter, at @AMReformer. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Please consider supporting us today by making a tax-deductible donation through our secure online donation portal at americanreformer.org. That's americanreformer.org.